Hello and welcome, friends, to Resilience in Challenging Times. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma treatment and the host of Sounds True's upcoming online event called the Trauma Skills Summit. Debuting this August, this free online summit will have a special focus on offering practical skills you can use to calm your nervous system, access inner resources, and deepen connection with others. 24 world-renowned experts in the field of trauma will share their wisdom and leading-edge tools for healing trauma, including our special guest today, my friend and colleague, Susan Stiffelman. Today, Susan and I will be speaking about parenting in the pandemic, how to help our children and ourselves face this pandemic with resilience and compassion. Susan is a marriage and family therapist, a credentialed teacher, and a licensed psychotherapist. She is the author of Parenting Without Power Struggles and Parenting with Presence. For over 40 years, Susan has worked with families to create greater harmony and a deeper connection between parents and children. And I cannot think of a better person to speak with us today about parenting in the pandemic. A very warm welcome to you, Susan. We so appreciate you being here with us today.
It's wonderful to be here with you, Jeffrey, and with everyone watching. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. So let's begin. This time is like no other that any of us have ever faced, with the pandemic, the economic crisis, with our awakening about or deepening unrest about racial inequality in the country. So many things are going on, and this is stressing individuals and families alike. And recently, you and I had been chatting a little bit about how parenting in the pandemic presents different challenges for parents. So I wonder if we could just start with, from your perspective, what do you consider to be the stressors that are impacting how parents fulfill their duties to themselves and to their kids?
I think it's the impossibility of the challenge, really, in terms of our rhythm, our natural order of things, the way we structure our days or have structured our days since our child was born, and how we have evolved based on the age and needs of our kids. And suddenly, literally out of nowhere, comes a demand for adaptation and adjustment and flexibility and accommodation in every aspect of our life, from how we shop for food, to what we do with our children after school, to going to school, to our own work life and our own commitments, to the care that we want to show to those in our extended family or our elderly parents. So we're pulled in so many directions with no preparation, and human beings are amazingly good at adapting and making adjustments as needed to stressors and demands of life. But typically we do that either over an extended period of time rather than within a couple of days, or we do it in smaller doses. So we might, if we find out, for instance, that a member of our family is ill, then we rearrange some things. We might ask friends to watch our kids for an extra day or afternoon, or we might take off a day of work. But here, everything has piled on all at once. And so we are being called upon to stretch and expand and adjust in this incredibly accelerated way in every aspect of our life. And it's no wonder that we feel like, deer in headlights, still trying to kind of keep up and show up in a way that's resonant with who we want to be for ourselves and for our children. That's sometimes easier said than done.
Very much so. I know that a lot of parents that I work with expressed the frustration of feeling that they can't be everything. They can't be a teacher and a parent and a worker. They just feel like something has to give. They're pulling their hair out. And then some of my patients are talking about noticing that they're shorter with their children. Their tempers are flaring more. And kids are having, after months of being cooped up, more reactivities, which of course brings us into, the normal power struggles that parents and children have amplified like 1,000 degrees by this crisis. So what are the ways that parents might be able to take on a perspective and a way of being that can help give them more permission and to help them be able to parent more in line with how they'd like to really show up?
One of the things I'm encouraging the parents in our community to do is to reflect and remind themselves of those times when they have exceeded what they thought they were capable of. Because the beauty of getting older, whether that means you're 25 or 65, is that you can look over your shoulder at other events in your life where you have surpassed what you thought you could do. It empowers us when we remember that we actually are more resilient than we may be aware of in a moment-to-moment basis. So when we draw upon this sense in ourselves that there's a deeper well than we realized, even though maybe on a day-to-day basis we aren't in the habit of dipping into that, it can embolden us a bit to feel that we can just today get through today. And, borrowing from the 12-step program, it's not that you have to do this for 6 months, it's that you do it today. And you remind yourself of the times in the past when you have been really tired or not felt you had the resources to deal with a child maybe who wet the bed, and you're already just at the end of a very long rope that's been frayed, or somebody gets sick, or your boss makes an urgent demand, that you pause and you remember, okay, this is hard. This is really, really hard. I don't want to do this, frankly. And I have surpassed what I thought I could do in the past. Remember when this happened or when that happened, and I'm going to call forth that part of myself to get me through this thing in front of me. And then at the end of the day, I give myself permission to have a big cry or hide under the covers when at last I can climb into bed.
So part of this is sort of welcoming our humanity, that it's going to be natural for us to feel overwhelmed, frustrated, depleted, tired of this, disappointed in ourselves, disappointed in the kids, disappointed in the world. And part of what it seems like you're suggesting is to remember past functioning, to remember past resilience, and to try to both recall how we survived, and that at the time we felt we couldn't take one more step, and yet we ended up doing that. So in some ways, it almost sounds like you're trying to help the parents connect to the resources that the stress level is detaching them from. They're more involved when we're in fight or flight, we're more involved in the overwhelm instead of looking at what we carry with us to meet that moment.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's beautifully said, Jeffrey, that separation from the circumstances and the seeming impossibility of meeting the needs or demands of whoever is pounding on us in that moment, and it could be ourselves, and reflecting again on who we are in the deepest way. And I have done this in my life again and again. When I feel that I've run out, I just have no more, I'm on empty, leave me alone, just let me go and hide. And if that's not possible, and certainly as a parent, there are times when it's not possible, then the next best thing is, okay, where is that part of me? I know it's in there because it's shown up before. Can I call that forth? Now, the other part of that for many parents is the need for support, because I often say, and as do many others, we are so much better together. So there are times when we feel that we have run dry. There's just nothing that we can bring up in ourselves, energy-wise, patience-wise, tolerance-wise, understanding-wise. We don't want to hear another story. We don't want to read another book. We don't want to make another version of egg, for breakfast. And I find that when we're really, really, really starting to get snappy and frustrated and, taking it out on those that we prefer not to, or on ourselves, that it's often a call to reach out to a trusted loved one, friend, ally, therapist, neighbor, and say simply, help, I'm overwhelmed. And they may not be able to help in a practical way. They may not be able to come to your house and make breakfast for your children while you go back to bed. But we are so interconnected that when we are witnessed by someone who cares about us, that alone sometimes can kind of calm the storm.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking basically about co-regulation, the idea that when we're in connection with someone else, it helps us come back to a more safe place in our nervous system. And, the isolation that the pandemic has brought on has sort of ripped all the social supports, or many of the social supports that people would have, just seeing it other parents at drop off or pickup, having play dates, doing all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So there's a huge loss of that space. So one of the things parents can do is still to reach out, even if it's virtually, right? To find ways to connect. And that can help parents come back to a sense that they're not alone in this.
I have a great story I'd like to share if it's all right.
Perfect, yes.
So I have a monthly Parenting Without Power Struggles membership program, and we get together with parents from around the world, and parents ask questions, they get coaching, they ask for support, and sometimes they submit a question ahead of time if they can't attend. And a few days ago, someone wrote in this question that she loves her children so much. They're such great kids, and she's just at the end of her rope. She's so exhausted. And her children are fairly young. She's doing this without the support of her husband, who works outside the home, and trying to keep her job. So she has a full-time job. She's working from home with two young children who really can't just entertain themselves all day long, and trying to juggle it all. And she wrote in her question that the other day she had gotten so frazzled. There were emails coming from her employer, and her kids were making, noise and demands, that she kind of made them go outside and shut the door. And she said she just couldn't, she needed a break. And then she felt so guilty. She felt so terrible about it. And I won't repeat all the details of the letter, but it was so powerful. And I was tracking the comments as I was reading this aloud to the rest of the community who were on live. And everyone in there was saying, I can relate. It's happened to me. We love you. We get it. And after I finished, Jeffrey, I was so moved that I just sat with it for a second. And then I just kind of went, well, first of all, I'm giving you a big, big hug. And then I patted her on the shoulder. And then I decided to invite whoever wanted to come on screen to come on screen. And so all the mamas that were in this group, I don't think there were any dads there that day, a whole screen worth of mothers came on, and each of them said to her, we get it. Don't be hard on yourself. You're doing your best. I can relate. And they visually kind of sent this kind of love. And I'll tell you, all of us had tears in our eyes, because that vulnerability and that willingness and honesty that she expressed moved everybody, because we've all been there.
Absolutely. I know that for a lot of parents who are trying very hard to be the best parents they can, their hardest critic is themselves.
Yeah.
And so what a wonderful resource for parents in that group to be able to get the support and the validation that so many people, especially in this period of isolation, are not getting. Related to the question I asked you about parents is one for kids. Many folks have expressed to me concern about, without school, without summer camp, without organized activities or childcare, that besides impacting my life, I'm worried about this impacting the child's socialization, their ability to be with other people. So what are your thoughts about that?
This question has come up a lot. It's come up a lot in the work that I've been doing since the pandemic, with various psychologists teaming up with me to offer support to parents. And it's been interesting to hear the answer so consistently from so many of my colleagues: don't worry about it. And my way of thinking, I often rewind our current day arrangement of how we live and how we raise children. And I go back a few hundred years, a couple hundred years, because it's my belief that the acceleration of the ways that we're now living, whether it's driving our kids across town to play with another child or, you know, all the screen stuff that happens, it's like our brains haven't really caught up. We are still the person biologically and neurologically that we were a couple hundred years ago for the most part. I know some changes have happened, but it takes time for us to, you know, deeply evolve in terms of our neurodevelopment. So if you were raising your kids on the farm, way out in the boonies, kind of where I grew up in the Midwest, it was very common that your children would not be interacting or playing. Many times those kids were homeschooled. Maybe you'd go to town to the dance once a month. So I think that we have magnified this idea that children's development depends upon daily interaction with their peer group. In fact, some would argue that it's sort of an aberration, you know, that children are not meant to be thrown in together with kids all the same age, that you know, having the mix of ages if you have more than one child. But even if you have one child and it's just you and that child, I'm not worried about social development. Social development can happen in one parent and one child playing a game and having the child sometimes lose, or helping with chores, or listening to one another. And of course, now we do have technology, so there's the opportunity to connect virtually with friends and relatives and grandma and grandpa. So this period of time is relatively short, even though it feels like it's been forever in a child's development. And I really would urge parents to relax around that concern.
That's great. That's great, because I think that that's just adding the pressure onto parents who feel like, I don't even know how to tread water, and what do I do about having my kid do this too? Along those lines, are there things that parents can do to help their child cope with an optimal amount of resilience during this, or to not become so frightened or so frustrated?
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, we are the one they're watching to determine how they should feel about these things going on. So it always starts with us. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling overwhelmed and frustrated, find support. Make sure that you have people in your community, you're part of a tribe, you have neighbors, whatever it is, that help you feel less overwhelmed by what's going on, because
Right.
how your state is the greatest influence on how your child will do. Now, certainly there are children who have a propensity toward heightened sensitivity, so they're watching more carefully for cues or clues that things aren't okay, or for anxiety. And we, always want to make it safe for our kids to tell us their concerns, their fears, what they're going through, without forcing advice or rushing in with rational bits of information in an attempt to reassure them. While it can be very helpful for children to hear that you're not concerned, or these are the positive signs to quell their worries, it's always good to get everything out in the open first. And we sometimes prevent our kids from really telling us the full extent of their fears, if they have them, because we immediately jump in. I call it crashing the party with, oh, don't worry about that, or we've got that handled. You don't have to think about that. Grandma will be fine. We have plenty of food. We can always get. So we tend to rush in out of our own anxiety about their anxiety to convince them not to be upset, when it may be more beneficial to say, tell me more about that, sweetheart. And then at the end of that, when they feel relaxed and safe to tell you the full extent of whatever they're ruminating over, so would you like me to give you some thoughts on what you've shared? I'm so happy you told me. I have some things I'd love to tell you if you would find it helpful. And make sure that they're open and receptive before you decide for them that they're going to hear your words of reassurance. Because if they're not open, it could actually make them feel more panicked, because there you are please just listen to me. You shouldn't be worried is not a very calming, reassuring position to take.
Right, right. And I love the emphasis on the fact that parents' state is going to determine or have the largest impact on the child's state. If the parent is relatively okay about what's going on, the child is going to have a better chance of being okay and not as panicked about it. I think that a lot of parents do want to rush in and quiet the child down because we feel like that's good parenting. Like, okay, I picked up a fear, they're afraid, let's just squash that. Okay, there's nothing to be afraid of. Okay, go back and eat your fruits. So what do you say to parents who do have this tendency to rush in? What can you do to help them support, like, because I think people are drawn by, I don't want to be a bad parent, so I don't want my child just going around and being afraid.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What's your
So
advice?
it's really an important question. And it's sort of one of the cornerstones of my work is parenting with presence, meaning that you start by staying present in your own skin. Boy, I am really knocked out by my child's fear. I so want to, whatever good parenting means, I want to be that. I want to do that. It's the least I can do. I feel so helpless in so many aspects of life right now. At least I can calm my child down. At least I can reassure her. But I would really encourage parents to stay present with the discomfort of your child's discomfort, the anxiety over your child's anxiety. For many of us, our children provide us with tremendous opportunities for healing from our own childhood challenges. So it may be, for instance, that you struggled with many unspoken, unvoiced fears as a little girl or a little boy because your parents didn't want to hear it, or they told you to grow up, or that's silly, don't worry about that. So we internalized it. And so we may bring to our own parenting life a resolve, I'm not going to do to my kids what was done to me. So any hint of fear that your child expresses, you want to kind of heal your own little girl or little boy simultaneously while addressing the fear of this child in front of you. And I would encourage parents to stay present, if possible. If an old memory is willing to surface, to be present with that, maybe to honor yourself. Yeah, that was so hard as a little child to not feel that my fears were welcome or that my parents could hear them. So let's see what's happening with Samantha now. Okay, so I wish she wasn't afraid. And you almost can narrate with yourself. I notice when she expresses her fears that I get all shaky inside. And there's an urgency that I feel in my skin, like I have to make this go away. I have to make her feel better. And maybe some of that is wanting to do it for who I was when I was 9 years old too. And let me just sort of, okay, stay present with that. It's uncomfortable. I feel a little shaky. And the more you can do that and bring yourself back to yourself, then you can even check in with Samantha, sweetheart, I'm really glad you told me that you've been worried about what might happen with grandma. Thank you. Would you just like to tell me more about that? And so it's a slower process, but you're just present with her now because you're present with yourself and able to remember that not every complaint that a child voices needs a solution. Many times all that's needed is the opportunity to get it out in the open.
Right. A lot of parents, I think, get caught into the urgency to fix something. And that cuts off the actually learning what the child is trying to really say to you emotionally.
Yeah.
Are there practices that you invite parents to partake in to help them be a little bit better able at watching their own stuff, not acting on just reactivity and impulse, but to be more intentional, more present, more able to decide their course of being rather than just automatically autopilot doing it?
Yeah. Well, some of it is using the opportunities that we get every single day with our kids to notice the things that particularly trigger us, because those are golden. The things that you get most reactive to with your children are the places where you can really do some deep healing for yourself. And in the process of doing that, you modify and rearrange who you are with your kids. So for some people, when their children ignore them, it just they go from 0 to 60. So you notice, well, that is a hot spot for me. And especially now, and then you'll hear the little lawyers in your head building the case. I do so much for them. And do they have any idea how hard I'm working to meet their needs and keep my job? And nobody around here, so you'll hear all that and you just welcome it. Yep. Yeah, I have that thought. There it is. And then you can also see, well, where else in my life do I feel ignored? Now, I've done a lot of beautiful sessions with Byron Katie on parenting. So this is where we move into that space and looking at the stories that we're telling ourselves, that everyone ignores me or my children shouldn't ignore me. And quite often, if you get into that work and you do the turnaround or you look at the belief from various angles, you might find that there's also truth in the fact that you ignore them. Or that what triggers you when they ignore you is that you ignore yourself. And they're just reflecting back something that you do to yourself. I find this very powerful and a beautiful way to sort of mitigate the intensity of the emotions that we sometimes feel flooded by when we notice that the temperature is rising inside of us.
Right. Plus, I really love that this helps shift it back into the person. So instead of it be between me and my child, I can all of a sudden begin to look at it as between me and my parents, me and my aunt, or me and another experience I had that still shapes how I respond now. And that's an empowering position, because I think a lot of times if parents are frustrated that their children are ignoring them, they get furious. How do I make them pay attention to me? How do I make them respect me? And that could be fueled by this wound that's not fully conscious, instead of by the desire to be the best parent they could be at that
moment. And the other thing is that whenever you come at someone because you need them to be different than they are, and of course you can't change anyone but yourself. You can influence your children if they're open, but you're not going to get too far if they're not. So when you come at your kids, because I need you to not ignore me so these awful feelings don't arise in me, you've now put the child in charge of your emotional state. And as you know, I talk about being the captain of the ship or the lawyer or the dictator. It's a cornerstone of my work. And when your child is sort of calling the shots and you need them to be a certain way so you feel like you're a good parent, or so that these negative, painful feelings don't arise, you've already really messed with the hierarchy that our children know intuitively that they're meant to be able to rely and depend upon us as the one in charge, the calm captain of the ship. And so that neediness can propel us into a lot of power struggles and battles. I need you to pay attention to me so I don't feel invisible is not the way to go. We work with healing that feeling inside of us, and somewhat miraculously, things on the outside take on a different view.
That's what's really wonderful about this. And again, the arc of most of Sounds Crew's work, and yours as well, is about the inner dimension to parenting, to our own development in any area. And that our children can be a teacher in that impact. Especially, like you were saying before, the times that we get the most triggered are the times we can learn the most.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a great quote: he who is most attached to a particular outcome has the least amount of power. So when I have the story that I need you, my child, to not be worried or to be cooperative or to listen to me or do what I ask, and I come at the child with that intensity of that need, magnified right now during the pandemic by so much of a feeling of powerlessness in so many parts of our life. So it's understandable that we may do that. But when we are attached to them behaving or doing something, in a way it backfires, because children intuitively know, I'm not supposed to be in charge of your well-being. And they provide us with many opportunities to bring it back to ourselves.
That's very true. Question also that comes up often is parents struggling with self-care.
Mm.
when so much is going on right now and so much of their time is taken up with uh, minding the children, minding work, minding their place of living. What do you say to parents who are struggling with, maybe I should just let self-care go for a while because I'm just barely treading water?
No, don't do that.
So tell me about why it's important for a parent to actually do self-care.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's fascinating how we evolved to a point where we wear it as a badge of honor to be exhausted, to eat the crumbs off our child's plate when they've rushed off to play, not to even go to the bathroom or have a drink of water when that urge is there because they have so much to do. The first way that I talk to parents about this that sometimes hits the most powerfully is this what you want your child to live like when they grow up? Is this the model you want to exhibit for how they should parent? And 99% of the time, we don't want our kids to make those kinds of sacrifices. We want them to be fed and nourished and rested. So that can drive the point home when we realize that they are watching us very, very carefully about how they should live their life. But secondly, it's demoralizing to put yourself at the bottom of the list. And it also maintains sort of the sense that many children can have, because children are egocentric. They, especially young children, do believe that the world revolves around them, that they're the center of the universe to some degree, and that if we're not honoring the needs that we have for care, then they will learn that we're really just sort of a functionary. That for kids in general, they sort of see parents as wallpaper, like we're just there. It's not developmentally appropriate for a young child to be thinking, I wonder if mommy needs rest right now. Or has mommy had a good sit down for lunch? It's not how they operate. We're just there to sort of meet their needs, serve them, take care of them, keep them alive. But if we don't counterbalance that with, sweetheart, I love you and I want to be with you, but I'm going to have a little lay down for 10 minutes, or I'm going to read my book for a few minutes, or I'm going to have a bath by myself, and I know it's going to be so hard for you to wait. Or I'm going to be on the phone with Aunt Edith now for a little bit, and I bet you're going to wish I was just with you. But you know what? Mommy and Aunt Edith love each other, and we're going to have our time together. These are things that position you, in a sense, with more captain. You know, you're compassionately letting them know that you have a life and you have needs, whether they're physical or emotional, psychological, and that you will meet them. So I think it's very, very healthy in terms of modeling, and in terms of course, not running as empty ourselves by replenishing. But that shouldn't be the first reason, I don't believe. It's not make sure you eat and sleep so that you can give. I think it's much deeper than that you deserve it just as much as your children do. It's important to show them that. And it's important to acknowledge that they're not going to be necessarily excited that you're not available to them, and without, justifying it. I know it's hard to wait. Yeah.
So being empathic without being guilt-ridden about
Yes.
what they're asking. When you were speaking, I was reminded of a story a supervisor told me years and years ago when she was a young mother, and her mother, the child's grandmother, was babysitting during the day while her daughter, the adult daughter, was working as a psychologist. And she'd come home and she'd rush in to see the child. And before she would, her mother would grab her by the arm and says, first, make yourself a mother. And she would ask her to toast a bagel and put some cream cheese on it and then sit and eat it. That before you take care of her, you have to feed yourself first. You have to make yourself a mother. And I hadn't thought about that for decades until you just brought that story back.
That's beautiful.
And it really, I guess, talks about that idea about you're going to be a better mother if you're also nourishing yourself. And you're going to be a better father if you're nourishing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And You know, this is a trend that we've seen for many, many years developing, that sacrifice, exhaustion, fatigue, that these are things we almost brag about as if to prove that we're good parents. But I really hope that we can unravel that, because it's not in service to our children to have them see us not honoring and taking care of our beautiful selves.
Absolutely. I think that what a lot of children will find then is that they don't feel comfortable relaxing. If they never saw their parents do that, if they always saw them putting everything else first, they're gonna likely do the same thing.
Yeah, that's very true.
So any other advice you may want to offer parents as they're sort of trying to navigate this particular time? Anything that you think would be helpful for a parent to keep in mind?
Well, the first is it is short-lived, even though short-lived has gotten redefined a few times. But I would invite us all to, you know, when this first happened and we thought it might be a month, that was the first piece of information. Oh my gosh, a month? My kids aren't going to be in school for a whole month? I have to work from home for a month? Now it's been quite a bit longer and we're okay. We're still standing. And this is what honestly kind of thrills me and inspires me about human beings, is that incrementally you have grown and stretched and accommodated just one day at a time. And that's all you have to keep doing, is get through today with as much kindness toward yourself, understanding, presence as possible. Don't project some future that isn't here. And ask for support when you need it, and understand that there will be days that you fall into bed and you go, well, I hope tomorrow's a little bit better. That was hard. And even if you didn't show up in the way that you would have liked, to just, there, oh yeah, wow. And I encourage parents at the end of the day to reflect on 5 things that went well, because we have a tendency to review where we fell short, where we were impatient, where we yelled, where we didn't listen to the story with, you know, utter fascination. And I really invite parents to do the reverse, and to, where was there a moment of connection with your child? Where did you share a smile or a laugh? Where did you invite that child to just read a book with you? And magnify those so that you feel more that you're doing it, and you are doing it. You're doing it. You're doing all right. We're all in this together. Find a hand to hold virtually or in real life to remind you of that. And hopefully this will as well. Just honor yourself for this very, very challenging parenting journey that we're all on right now. It's very challenging, and you're doing it.
That's really lovely. And if people want to come to maybe get some more group support or join one of those programs you offer, where would they go, Susan?
Help for Parents on my website, susanstiffelman.com. We have a monthly membership program that offers lots of support. There's a wonderful community there. We even have a co-parenting with a narcissist membership program for those in that situation. And all kinds of great information. If they get the newsletter at susanstiffelman.com, they'll be updated with events.
Perfect. Perfect. I really want to thank you, Susan, for taking this time with us today. I really appreciate everything you're doing in the world, and us also with us today for this episode of Resilience in Challenging Times.
Thank you for having me, Jeffrey, and everyone at Sounds True. I'm so glad to be part of this effort.
Oh, we are too. And I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us today. For Sounds True, this is Jeffrey Rutstein. SoundsTrue.com. Waking up the world.